Hey, the Rulers, Zemo73 with another feature match for the week. This time we have Paul playing the updated Athenia Life Loss loop, or Oberazuki loop, or it's kind of crazy when you see it go off, versus Dan Roland playing a first draft of Justice. Let's go ahead and jump right in. This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for product, and fowtlibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists. It's also brought to you by our guest lecturer patrons, Vite Ramen. Class is in session. As we get started here, I just want to send a reminder once again about the Force of Will Festival coming up on November 5th and 6th in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We really hope you come check it out. There is going to be insane prizing for this event, and you are not going to want to miss it. There's a video in our channel about all the more details, so go check that out. Well, we hope to see you there. We are getting in here with Wall Justice and Athenia Loops. The Wall Justice is driven by this idea of lots of different additions, as you'll see here with Wall. And the Athenia loop is trying to set up Oberazuki to do some very crazy 3-step loops to get her essentially infinite attack. It is a very, very cool list. So we see a pass from there from Paul. That's kind of expected from this list. It's going to be a little bit of a slower start, designed to kind of just spiral out of control once it gets the loot pieces it needs to the graveyard. So it does need to find some discard outlets here. Justice is sitting pretty and going to find ways to be able to potentially set up some weird, essentially lockouts with the wall. We see that Mastery for daily research come down here, which sets us up to be able to grab any addition we want. This is typically going to be, you see there, Origins of the Seven Lands. It is a pretty common first draw if you don't already have it in the hand. The Justice list only really needs to play 1 to 2 copies of Origins right now because of daily research, which is very, very helpful because it doesn't really have a way to get rid of the addition once it hits hand. So daily research here sets us up really nicely for being able to go into Origins Drywing. Out comes Origins of the Seven Lands, going to reveal that Drywing from outside the game so we get that floating green and recover a stone, and then we can potentially use that stone for something based on what's in hand. 2-cost cards are pretty good, and there's a couple of really good strong 2-drop additions, which you see here with the First Moon. So this means other additions you control cannot be destroyed, which is really great when you have Wall, because this essentially means that while this combination is on field, Dan will not be able to take any damage, because Wall will prevent it all and then can't be destroyed by its own effect, so it'll just stay on the field forever regardless how much damage it takes in a single turn. That being said, it's not so detrimental against Athenia because we have access to a life drain, which it gets around that, but it is still something to keep in mind. We do Eltising's Secret Hideout as a follow-up with a pass turn to Paul, who uses Mikage Rhea to dump one of the pieces of the cards for the combo to the graveyard, which is the Death Scythe. You can use either Death Scythe. Ultimately, we choose to use the Death Scythe from AO3 because it can be used to play Will for Mage Arts, which Elixir's Love is a Mage Art, and that's kind of important. Going into our turn 2 here, Paul, it's kind of helpful to know that that wall is already in place proactively, or that that wall combination is already there set up on turn 1, because now Paul just doesn't have to worry about swinging. He's not in a position where he's ever going to try to crack the wall, so he's really at a position where it's like, well, I just have to go for Spirit of Decay loops at this point, so I can just play the defense game and kind of board control until I hit that spot, which is pretty solid for him. So Oberazuki does come down there, gets to get those additional counters. Just serving as a 5/5 flyer right now. Right away, we're going to see Grandfather's Secret Research. Grandfather's Research Project, so we're going to get to go into Justice. This is going to get Dan some extra cards in hand. A little bit strange that we didn't use another Origins to make this so that the Grandfather's Research Project only cost us 1, but he might only be playing 1 Drywing in the sideboard, which would be a weird choice. So we have Justice here. Justice is going to do a lot of work. Being able to kind of get bigger and bigger here, use it for Mastery for some different elements, and kind of punch through damage. While the stats start out small at only being a 6/6, it does quickly get very large. That being said, Paul is at a position where setting up a stat neg if he orders an Oborozuki could be pretty helpful against the Justice, because like if he then tries to tap it for any reason, Justice would immediately die because he'll lose the Eternal as soon as he gets tapped. So that could be an element to kind of control the board that way as well. Just trying to get more of our cards to grave here. We're going to go ahead and see Death Scythe removing 3 cards in the graveyard to be able to then... Oh, no, we're just proactively using Athenia to draw some more cards. If those cards ever do get to move from the RFG back into the graveyard, we could potentially see a lot of value generated for Paul on those Oborozukis. Interestingly enough, at an end of turn, we're discarding the Origins. Feels weird to have done that. Maybe it didn't feel good to try to make that extra will right now. I mean, we couldn't have made that extra will, so maybe it was I don't want to spend that 1 just to do nothing, when it seems like, especially since Dan has already shown that he doesn't have a second, or isn't using a second dry wing, so just spending 1 to make a dry wing that doesn't exist do less seems like a call in the moment. Would have been really helpful, though, against things like Melfi, because the dry wing would stop these Melfis from being valid as well. But Melfi's going to get to resolve, produce some extra will. It is also going to go on the chase for Justice to go ahead and recover this card. So Justice has had 1 spell cast. He wasn't tapped already, so he's just going to stay recovered at this point. Using one of the floating from... Melfi to go ahead and do Sniper Shot, which is going to put some additional +4 counters on the Justice, as well as then Justice gaining 4 counters by his own ability to shoot the Rhea out of the way. This to me feels a little bit weird to do it this proactively when you could have swung with Justice and then in response to a block done Melfi, recover Justice, Sniper Shot. So then not only would you kill the blocker, but you'd get to swing in for 14 damage, and you'd get to recover Justice and then swing again, potentially. At this point in time, we kind of just missed out on the maximum optimization of that Justice value. Paul's turn, finally deciding to use this other Origins, revealing his own dry wing, it looks like. And then going to play Harvesting Season for 1, ultimately that's not going to work. He would have had to have spent 2 will for this, because the dry wing that he has... his Origins isn't going to produce any will. Ultimately, though, we see a Thief Sing come down just to cancel that Harvesting Season, and he can't pay for it. So it does work out just to cancel it instead. But just as a reminder, if your opponent has Dry Wing revealed, your Origins isn't going to produce any will. Paul's still able to call Stone this turn, does decide instead to order using a Gil Lapis. So this is going to help him mill some more cards. This is going to get him to buy something back. And potentially set up a board stat neg for this turn anyway, which would definitely kill the Melfi and the Thief Sing. See a mill of the top 4 here. Just waiting to see if Dan has any kind of response. Those mill 4 happen. We get to buy back a Resonator. I do see there's that Death Speaker Monk in the graveyard. That probably gets brought back just to help with the mill. Goes to scoop up the Death Speaker. And then in the response to the enter put counters on this card effect, because it is 2 separate effects, it seems like we're going to see a Black Moonchild God Art used to just kill the Gilapis. So we do not get the stat neg off or the life loss off, but we do get to buy back the Death Speaker Monk. Overall, still very helpful to get more cards in the graveyard for those Spirit of Decays that are soon to come. We can call stone here with the Moon Fragment. Also can use that stone to use Death Speaker Monk to mill even further or bring back Gilapis later turns. Dan not applying a ton of pressure right now, which is a little strange. I think it just comes down to comfort with swinging in with the Justice, because that is your, you don't want to lose it, because if he does, for instance, not have a backup plan, if the Justice gets killed and doesn't have another Grandfather's Research Project in hand, that he could be in for a bit of a problem. Down comes a Trishula. Trishula's going to get here, so that's certainly helpful. Gets him another stone, makes it so if he does hit 3,000, then we have Eternal for everything forever, which is very helpful. Right now we're sitting at total attack on board of 2 grand, so we need another 1 grand to give Eternal. And there it is with Guardian Dragon of Vels of the Kingdom. So this is going to get him a stone. We're at now 6 stones, so Dragon is getting additional 12. So he's at 15, and so now Trishula is live, and everything has Eternal and Pierce. This is pretty huge. That means that Paul's going to start taking damage, even with swing throughs because of Trishula. The problem is, though, that Oborozuki does have Bane. And so if he does swing here and doesn't have a removal for the Oborozuki, but also he has Eternal because of Trishula, so that's not a super big deal. So I don't know why we didn't swing with Justice there, other than to just not open ourselves up to some kind of counterplay, maybe. Death Speaker Monk coming down at the end of the turn to go ahead and mill the top 3 cards of the deck. We see 2 Elixirs Love and a Lorite. At this point in time, if we can get another Death Scythe to graveyard, we have the loop. We have all the pieces for the loop there. Hitting those Elixirs Love was very, very solid. We just need to either find a way to get Death Scythe back into the graveyard or get another Death Scythe into the graveyard. And then we can complete the loop, which is very, very cool. Oh, and we do have the 3rd Oborozuki, so that's very, very helpful. Spirit of Decay hitting the graveyard, a card coming to hand. Interesting that the Spirit of Decay went to the graveyard, unless the other card was also a Spirit of Decay. This Oborozuki is now, because of the fact that it will have all these counters and it's ordered, will be able to mess with the Eternal board state, because it can apply a stat neg to the board, which will then drop him below 3 grand attack owned, and so Trishula will no longer be giving everything Eternal, and so then things will just kind of cascade off to die. Which is kind of really relevant. Looks like we have 18 counters. 18 or 19 counters here for Paul. Gets to call stone, 4C1. That deck is very, very thin. As you can see, he's burned through a lot of his cards. But that's kind of the whole point of the Athenia deck. Oh, and we have the Athenias enters the Game of Gods. So now we get to start doing this cool loop here. So Paul gets to, as additional cost, move those 3 cards back from the graveyard, RFG to the graveyard, which includes the Death Scythe. This is going to see if there's any kind of response. He gets to float some extra will in response as well, to try if this can resolve. We see a Feathsing come down to try to stop it. He's got 4 additions in play, so this is probably going to get stopped. But we can use one of those floating will to just Lorite the Feathsing ability. And so then we just essentially paid 1 will to stop it, which is enough. So the Feathsing's still on field. I don't know why the Feathsing's now in graveyard. We're not canceling it. We're just... canceling the ability. Then we get to use Elixir's Love from the graveyard using that floating will, which is helpful to bring back Athenia Enters the Game of Gods. Then we can cast Athenia Enters the Game of Gods and recover 3 stones and force him to discard a card and banish a Resonator. Oh, that's why he banished the Feasting to the Athenia Enters the Game of Gods. And so now this loop, essentially, the way it works is he'll walk through it. Athenia Enters the Game of Gods, brings 3 cards back to the graveyard, including the Elixir's Love that we played from graveyard, recovers us 3 stones, forces our opponent to banish or discard a card. Then we use Death Scythe to remove Death Scythe, to remove itself from the graveyard, to be able to hit back to the Athenia's, the Elixir's Love. Sorry, no, exactly how this works. So it's a little bit complicated to explain. Essentially, the loop is Death Scythe removes 3 cards. Athenia Essence brings those 3 cards back to the graveyard, including then the Athenia's, or the Elixir's Love that you cast earlier from graveyard because of Remnant. You use the will from the floating from the Athenia's Essence to grab back the Elixir's Love. You remove a bunch of cards to be able to bring back the Elixir's Love with the Athenia as enters, and you just loop these 3 cards over and over and over again because of Death Scythe's ability to then force your opponent to banish all their Resonators and discard all their cards. In the meantime, this Athenia, or this Obrozuki, is going to get infinitely big because every single time 3 cards come back to the graveyard, she gets 6 counters. Ultimately, at this point in time, none of that matters because Dan has access to the impenetrable wall with First Moon, and we have no addition hate in this deck, but it doesn't really matter because Dan will never be able to play a card. As soon as he tries to tap the Justice for anything, is going to die, and Paul can just cast and recur Spirit of Decay and just drain him to death. So because we got to the loop, that is going to be the game. It's just a matter of waiting for Dan to concede. I think Paul's saying at this point in time, I have 38 counters on this Obrozuki, and then play skill Lapis to mill another 4 cards and buy back one of those Spirit of Decays from earlier. Spirit of Decay comes down. It's going to drain him for a bunch of life, but not going to be able to kill him this turn. It takes him down to 22. There's 15 cards in the graveyard. And then he has a second Spirit of Decay in hand, and so that'll be enough to drain 15, then 15, and then the game is over. Might have been more than 15 cards in order to make it so that 37 drained twice would be lethal, but Dan also could have just conceded the game as well, knowing that there was no way for him to come back at that point. So going into game 2 here, starting off with Wall again to draw a free extra card. Letting Paul take the draw is a little bit of an interesting choice. We see a Soul Hunt come down from Paul here. I have to imagine the only reason this is being cast is because there's a Death Scythe in hand. Yeah, there's a Death Scythe in hand. We don't want that in hand. We want it in graveyard. And so we're just going to get that to the grave as fast as possible. You do see that we have a potential for the opener of First Moon plus Wall. If I was Dan, though, I honestly don't think I would play the First Moon because Paul has shown that he has ways to get around the impenetrable wall. So I'd rather just leave up the will for interaction rather than tap out potentially to just set myself up for protection that I don't even need. Paul Wondering if he's going to take any actions here, or if we're just going to see a pass. Wouldn't be surprised in a deck that has like Rhea and Spirit Caller Elf that we see a pass, and the Gravekeeper to mill cards off the top of the deck that we might just like leave up interaction and then do things in end phase. Dan says, I'm not gonna let you just comfortably do that, so I'm gonna go ahead and slam this Witch of the Fallen Kingdom proactively as well at the end of your turn, so that we're already set up to not being able to use those Reyes, which is pretty important. You do see there's that nice Paul's favorite card being Institute, Magic Stone Research Institute, which is honestly pretty bad for Paul. Being able to just remove the entire graveyard from the game at instant speed can be really debilitating. We do see a swing in with the Witch into a Guardian Dragon just to ramp up some more stones, leaving himself with just coin to pass the turn. There's that Death Speaker Monk if we're going to mill the 4. Paul does have ways to bring cards back from the RFG, so Institute's not a terrible threat. But the problem is, because Dan has 3 rulers, he can really mess with the combination elements for Paul. Down comes that first Oborozuki unordered, which I think is an interesting choice. I feel like I probably would have ordered here. There's not really a benefit to not ordering. Getting those additional counters to being able to control Dan's board feels pretty important. Especially with that Guardian Dragon on field, being able to just apply a potential stat neg, or making it so that there's a world where Justice comes into play with 0 stats. Even though he'll have a turtle, it would still be, it's only 3 counters to make that happen. Counting the number of cards in graveyard here so that we can put the right number of counters on Athenia. On Oborozuki, looks like we have 8. We got to see Paul's Origins coming down here to use to do Origins, to do Drywing. Think we're probably going to see a Harvesting Season come down here, just to mill 10. Yeah, there's the Harvesting. So we use the extra will, recover the stone, essentially do Harvesting Season for 1, and so we get to mill the top 10 cards of the deck. This really, really helps to accelerate Paul's game plan, and sets him into a pretty strong spot. I almost kind of wonder why we didn't do that first. Then we would have had to, like, there's this weird, yeah, it's weird. It's a weird sequence here of, you know, do we do that first or second? Especially since we aren't planning on ordering that turn anyway. Later Oborozukis are going to be very, very large. Because the other thing is Oborozuki, that's the nice thing about it, is Oborozuki doesn't care about whether the cards are in graveyard or in the RFG. She just counts both. So Institute actually doesn't stop Oborozuki from being able to just have a bajillion counters on her, which is a pretty good counterplay. We are going to go ahead and commit to that Institute. Sacks off a stone, gets a new stone, another Autoraktia's Memoria. So we're at 3 stones, so everybody's getting +6 right now. Looks like we do have a Grandfather's Research Project in hand. Down comes an Altising Secret Hideout, so we're at 3 additions now. Dragon is getting essentially +6 plus another 2 for each stone, so +14. So he's 17 right now. Trishula would feel pretty good here, although he'd still be less than he needs for Eternal. He'd be at 27. There is a Grandfather's Research Project there. If Dan does go for the Grandfather's Research Project here, it was a little bit of a misplay because Grandfather gets to put a 1-drop addition into the field, so before he even contracts. So if we play the contract, we could have essentially saved ourselves 1 will for that Altising Secret Hideout, and not have to worry about it. Yeah, down comes Grandfather's research project. Maybe Dan is hoping that he draws into another 1-drop addition off the top to be able to cheat in. Ultimately, no. It does look like a Sniper Shot and a Origins. Origins not doing a ton here since there's already an Origins revealed, or a Drywing revealed. Do see a White Child God's Art there. This probably feels like Dan only wants, knowing that he only has 1 will available right now and maybe not enough mastery chance to make use of Justice, to say like, I only have 1 cancel in my hand, I want to make sure I can cancel whatever you're going to play. The problem here is that ordering can't be canceled, and so this body's going to hit board regardless. Now a Feasting here would be able to stop, potentially be able to stop the enter effect of the Spirit of Decay, but it's still gonna, if he doesn't have Feasting, or if Paul has 3 excess will here, which I think he might be at 4 stones to do, that would have been really good. I also would have thought that Paul might have used Origins Drywing here, since Dan hasn't done it yet, to go ahead and get an extra free will to use towards something like a Feasting. But again, that comes down to, you know, how many Drywing is Paul playing in his sideboard? Is it just the 1 to really set it up, and then we're done from there? Spirit of Decay coming in, draining a lot of life there, having quite a few counters. But ultimately, Altising Secret Hideout does help this pretty massively. An Oberazuki ordered would have been significantly better, because then we could have gotten around the hideout. But at this point in time, with just the pocket spot removal that Spirit of Decay brings to the table, there's just not much that we're going to be able to do. Just passes the turn there after Calling Stone. See another Autoraktia's Memoria. Justice sitting in a nice 1,000 defense or stats before he even gets any counters, which is pretty nice. If there's a Spirit, if there's a Sniper Shot in hand, which it looks like there is, this should be the lethal turn, which is interesting enough that if Dan had saved his Light Child God's Art, he would have definitely had game this turn. Justice rigging in for 10, completely protected. So that's fine. I will go down to that much. Swings in for another very large amount of damage. The Oberazuki blocks. And this looks like we'll probably see the Sniper Shot here. Yeah. So at the end of this chain, Paul's going to end up at 500 life because of this Sniper Shot. Because it's going to... Justice is going to go up to 14-14, shoot the Oberazuki out of the way. The dragon swings in, gets him down to 5. Now Justice and the Black Witch can swing again. And he has Dark Child God's Art to be able to just kill the Spirit of Decay out of the way. And there's nothing Paul can do to stop that outside of potentially a Lorite. But again, Dan has a full grip of cards in hand. And so probably has a good amount of cancels to be able to make that work. So the combat trick pushes through. The Witch gets to swing in and finish the game, and we'll go into a close game 3. So Paul did have the Lorite there, but Dan had a full grip of stuff to be able to disrupt it. So the God's Art was going to get through, and we swing in. So Paul, once again, looks like choosing to take the draw this time. Potentially. Do see a grandfather's research project there for Dan. Didn't see a daily research, though. Dan only having cast 1 daily research in the first 2 games is very interesting. Just wasn't seeing them. While helpful to draw another card. Oh, Paul choosing to take the play again. Interesting. First stone is the magic stone of Black Silence. Dan pointing at everything. Very animated. It just makes me wonder what he's saying. Yeah, hits that first stone. Dan realizing he forgot to shuffle his stone, and then a pass to Paul. I don't know why he just drew 2 cards. Does look like he's at 8 cards. I don't know why he drew twice for turn. He does pass the turn, and we see a Grave Speaker Monk get canceled by a Feathsing. Yeah, Dan just totally drew twice for his first turn for some reason. Remember, kids, you don't get to do that. It's once per turn. Oborozuki comes down here. Knowing that... See, I'm wondering why we didn't just order that Oborozuki. The only thing I could think of is maybe we just prefer to be on Force Resonance Death for the start of the game for a long amount of time. Because even if he has another Feasting here, he burns the coin on Feasting, and we still get an Oborozuki with at least 1 card in graveyard. And so at that point in time, we have 1 counter, and we can, this little 3/3 that can do a stat neg, but it also has Bane Drain, and I don't know, it just feels like there could have been more value there. Down comes a Guardian Dragon. Really just not seeing the additions here for Wall Justice. Do see a Lorite come down to cancel him getting another stone. Will we see the cancel in response? Yeah, that hand is no additions from what I can tell. Looks like Prisia, Feathsing, 2 Lorites, and 2 Grandfather's Research Project. Maybe even a Darkness Witch. Does use to Lorite to Feasting to cancel the Lorite cast, getting that extra stone. 4C1, thank you to the Water Moon Fragment. And now Dan being completely tapped out, with Paul going into a turn where he's got some good cards in graveyard, and a potential for an ordered Oborozuki here could be really big. Ultimately, though, does just choose to call stone, hits Killing Stone, and pays the 3 for it. And then just a pass. Dan really not wanting to crash his dragon into the Athenia with its Bane and Drain currently. Does decide to make the commitment. See a block. And just like that, we see Darkness Moonchild get to go ahead and kill the Oborozuki just to burn that and get out of the way. in comes for 11 damage, takes him down to 26. Then feasting for 4 more, down to 22. Oh, no, we are going to see, looks like, potentially maybe a Mikage Rhea here. Yep, Rhea coming down to try to mill a card to the graveyard. Is this going to get canceled or stopped? We do see a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom come down to stop that search. So we'll just go ahead and block with the feasting, gain 4. His feasting should also die. It'll be a... Oh, no. Yeah, his feasting should also die. It'll be a trade. They're both 4/4s. So I don't know why that feasting is still on the field. Doesn't have Eternal. There's no Trishula. It's not bumped by anything. Do not know why that feasting is still there. Grandfather's Research Project, just to draw 2 and attempt to put a 1-drop addition into the field. Do we have another 1-drop addition, or are we just drawing cards? Just drawing cards. Unfortunately, not seeing much value here. Getting another 4 damage in, potentially. Paul, thinking about making a play, ultimately decides, no, that's fine, I'll take the 4. Goes down to 26. I genuinely don't know why that feasting is still on the field. It does not have any kind of pumps, and Athenia is also Ray is also a 4/4. Hopefully it just gets killed here in a second off of this Gil Lapis Statnik anyway. Lorite to stop the recursion. Does Paul have a response? Oh, Lorite to stop the... Is he stopping the Statneg or is he stopping the mill is the question. He only gets to stop one of the 2 abilities. Does just choose to stop the stat neg abilities. We do get the mill and the buyback. A Spirit of Decay wouldn't be terrible here because it would still get to drain and get those counters, and we don't have a that Altising Secret Hideout on board yet. Does decide to grab back the Oburazuki, which would set us up nicely for an order next turn. Pretty one-sided board here. The Gil Lapis is in a good position, though, to be able to take care of something. We see Origins coming down. That's a nice little turnaround for what potentially might be coming down here. Choosing to play the Operazuki just outright might be the right call, just to get another thing to be able to block the Guardian Dragon. Using the excess will and the recovered stone to cast Elixir's Love, getting back Harvesting Season. So we're clearly going to try to Harvesting Season next turn to mill our combo pieces. We're very much potentially in a world where Dan gets 1 turn to live, based on how well executed the combo goes, because Dan's kind of burned through a lot of his counters, and a lot of his aggression right now is not super great. Did top deck into a Whispers of the Wind. Now he does have Light Moonchild, which would certainly stop the combo turn for sure, or stop the combo from going off. It is a lot of like, you have to cast these cards, so it's a matter of does Dan figure that out. The piece here is that, though, if Paul sets up his first card of the turn to be Oburazuki anyway, then he's still in a really good spot, because he's going to have so many cards in graveyard that he'll be able to clear out Dan's entire board, essentially, which will then be like, cool, you white childed, you used Light Moonchild, I'm just going to kill you next turn anyway, because you're not going to be able to push through. Whispers of the Wind here, pretty old card that works really nicely. You get to look at the top card of the deck. Only have to pay 1 green less if the next card you cast shares a name with the card revealed, draws into it, which is really nice. Under Drywing, though, those Melfies don't do super much. Strangely enough, he pays Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom next. So even if he plays Melfi here, it will cost him 2 because of the current wording. Just so you're aware, if you're trying to play Whispers of the Wind Injustice, it specifically says your next card. And Guardian Dragon was his next card. Guardian Dragon's very large. It's a very real chance of Paul taking quite a bit of damage this turn. Dragon gets to swing in the air, and I do not believe that Gil Lapis has flying, so we're going to just go down to 11. That feasting from earlier is still on the board, but it absolutely shouldn't be, so this damage shouldn't be bothered anyway. Paul blocks it here. Do see those Precious call to actions, but those just haven't been cast at all this game. Dan only paying 1 for this Melfi, which is technically incorrect. His next card was Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom, so this Melfi should actually cost him 2. Not going to get him any value, though, because it's just going to draw him a card and not produce any will under the Dry Wing. So it does pretty much set Paul up for being able to stay safe. The only thing I think that would change this outcome is if Dan happens to draw into a sniper shot through his current misplays of how he's played cards. Like, the circumstances would have led him to be able to win here through, like, with his bad sequencing. If he had, at this point in time, if he had actually done it properly with Melfi, there would be no way for him to win this turn. But it does seem like he does not have the sniper shot, so this gives Paul a very good opportunity, especially since he actually attacked with the Guardian of Dragons. So if Paul has a way to be able to kill the Melfi, he can actually crash his Gil Lapis into the Guardian Dragon and set himself up really, really nicely. Dan operating off of just 1 will sets himself up for quite a bit of potential struggle here. And not seeing those daily researches really hurt. Calling Stone without having to tap because of how orders work. And we are going to see, it looks like, a Gil Lapis swing into the Guardian Dragon. Now, Dan could just stop this by just blocking with the Melfi and letting it throw under the bus. Ultimately, though, he does choose to just let the Gil Lapis die, which I feel like was also a misplay here. Just block with the tiny dude and force Paul to have a blocker, especially since you know he has Oburazuki in hand, and he's going to be able to then reorder. This Oburazuki is going to be very, very large, and he saw a Death Scythe off the top, so we're going to be able to very easily just clear the board. Paul doesn't even have to try to kill him this turn. You do see that we have the White Child God's Art here, so we're not going to try to combo off, but this is exactly what I said. Paul doesn't care because he just stat negs the crap out of Dan's board so that there's nothing that Dan can actually do to establish any damage, because he's a green deck and not any kind of burn deck, unless Dan's playing Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, and then just goes to his turn and loops it. That being said, that's even more of a reason that Dan should have just blocked with the Melfi, because at that point in time, if Paul had tried to use a card to stop that, use a card to kill the Melfi, then he wouldn't have been able to cast this Oburazuki. This is just, the sequencing here in this game 3 is a little bit shaky, and just kind of some lessons to be learned from both sides, as well as just some get to go in and kind of chastise Dan a little bit later about, hey, remember to take legal game state actions and be mindful of stat blocks. So we do see those counters get removed 1 at a time, which is the proper way to use Oburazuki. When you have priority with Oburazuki, always remove the abilities 1 at a time so that the stat negs kind of cascade and your opponent can't do a bunch of stuff in response before any of their stuff dies. You just slowly tick it up 1 at a time and kill the thing. So Guardian Dragons are very, very small. And this is all happening at the beginning of Dan's turn after he used that Prisia to kind of cantrip. So now we have this big stat neg that's big enough to kill those dragons that lasts for the entire turn. Kage Stonosauro does to choose to pay the 3 for it. Whispers of the Wind and Feasting, and they both have to stay right on top of the deck, so that is not helpful for Dan at all right now. Does finally see that Altsync Secret Hideout, but it's a little bit too late. And can play the Daily Research. Does have his 3rd edition, so Trishula gets to come in here, which is nice. He can do Grandfather's Research Project here. Like, that's still very much a card that he could do and flip into Justice, and Justice naturally has Eternal. So even under the stat neg, he still gets Justice, which is not irrelevant. The problem is that Justice is 2. It does get to draw him 2 cards, though, which could be helpful. Sets himself up. Because he's cast Pricia's Big Show, though, he's actually not in a terrible spot to be able to do a couple of Pricia casts to then go grab a Featsing to cancel some stuff that Paul might be able to do here. Paul's certainly going to stat neg the board so that, like, the Pricias and the Featsings will just immediately die, and we're back in the same spot, but it does at least buy him a turn. It does seem, though, that Paul has the combo pieces in hand. You see Elixir's Love. He just needs to do an Athenia Enters the Game of Gods, which is right there. We know that there's Death Scythe, and we know that Elixir's Love is in the graveyard. So we are at the point where we are going to be able to start looping here, doing the whole loop, which means that at this point in time, outside of Dan doing double Pricia into double Featsing, this is going to be the game for Paul. The problem here, too, is that just by doing the cost of Athenia Enters the Game of Gods, we're going to put 6 counters on the Orozuki, and so you get a lot of value out of it. You see a Big Show cast here. It's the same 2 cards. We ship those to the bottom. At this point in time, I think the only out is double Pricia into double Feasting. Hope for the best. The problem is the Oborozuki's also going to get to be able to attack this turn. And so Paul's going to also get a little bit of life back, which is pretty good for him. Paul does have enough will to play through the first Feasting. He'll be able to pay the 3 will for it, but he wouldn't be able to pay for the second one. And so at that point in time, Paul would be tapped out, and he'd be at a point where he swings in the air, gains the life, and then just applies another, neg 10, 5 half of his counters, and neg 10 to Dan's side of the field to make sure that just everything immediately dies. Turns out instant speed final battles on a body are pretty good. We do see another Big Show here, taking us off of being able to do double Pricia into double Feasting, unless the deck only runs 3, in which case in time he knew he only had 1 Feasting to grab. In response to the Feasting, though, it looks like we're going to go ahead and see just a full neg 10 to the board, so the Pricia will die. If we see a second Feasting in... Yeah, there are 2 Feastings in there. It's very strange that we did not just do double Feasting. Guardian Dragon does not help us at all. Getting us a stone into play tapped does not help us at all. Because at this point in time, any Resonator we're going to grab, we're going to have to banish to... So, like, even Guardian Dragon's going to get us a counter here. And then Guardian Dragon's big enough to survive the stat block neg. But the problem is Dan's going to have to immediately banish that dragon to the Athenia Enters loop. So we don't even get to keep the bigger Resonator. And just to end it on a high note, I guess, we do another Briseus Big Show. Finally seeing another 1-drop edition there. Sending them both to the bottom, knowing that it doesn't really do much at this point. Force him to banish the Guardian Dragon. Recover the stones. We have 2 floating will here. And the loop commences until Dan has 0 cards in hand. Paul has a gigantic Oburazuki that can keep any board gone for forever. He can swing with the first one to crack the wall before he can get access to First Moon, and then next turn we just swing out for lethal. So at this point in time, it's just a matter of walking through the loop here just to make sure all the steps are carried out properly. But Dan will be left with no cards in hand. We don't know what that top card is because he got rid of the 2 cards. Grandfather's research project, maybe. The problem is, again, the Oburazuki at that point in time will be too big. And so, thankfully, because of Deathsize's ability to remove 3 cards as part of cost, that can include itself, you just kind of infinitely recycle. Athenia enters the Game of Gods, and then you have an infinitely large Oburazuki who swings in for essentially infinite damage, and your opponent is just dead. So, enjoy Paul walking through the loop here, even if he doesn't kill him this turn because he doesn't have any way to get swiftness. Whatever board state Paul ends with, Dan will have just a top decked card and a stat negged board of probably -50 to just have it so that he has no way to play any kind of resonator, and that will be the end of the game. Deck profiles for both of these lists will be up later next week, because again, as a reminder, we have the GP this coming weekend. I hope you guys will come check it out. Just as a reminder, the chat for those GPs is locked to our channel members only, but we hope you consider joining the channel as a member. It gets you access to all kinds of cool perks like the emotes and everything else, and helps to support the channel financially. And other than that, just watching Paul finish out the game. So we swing through with that infinitely large Oburazuki that cracks the wall. Dan now has 1 card and 1 turn to live. Does Paul have any follow-up cards to doing the infinite loop? Looks like maybe. Does have a second Oburazuki, which is going to get him some other cards to graveyard. A Spirit of Decay, just to kind of put it for good measure, although he has Altisync Secret Hideout. So at this point in time, because the wall is cracked, Justice doesn't even really help us here, because getting the contract would require us to top deck a 1-drop edition to be able to then contract. And so, you know, it hasn't really seemed like those have been popping up very much for Dan, so I'd be curious when looking at the list exactly how many of those different 1-drop editions he's playing. We do see the stat neg from a Spirit of Decay, the life loss from a Spirit of Decay. Paul does have to be careful to not overextend, but we're going to go ahead and use an Origins of the 7 lands here. Looks like revealing does have a second Dry Wing. Going to go ahead and cast Harvesting Season just for, I guess, insult to injury. Wow, just eat through that entire deck. And a second Spirit of Decay? This man is brutal. Does look like a Death Speaker Monk to be able to get... Wow. Death Speaker Monk gets him the token, gets him to buy back a Spirit of Decay, and removes 1 card from the graveyard. So really, really leaning into just wanting to set Dan as low as possible. Not that the hero token really matters. Gets the Spirit of Decay back and taps out to play the Spirit of Decay. This is not a terrible move, honestly. This makes it so that even if Dan was playing... Sealed One-Eyed Dragon, this Spirit of Decay makes it so Dan can't even use the effective Sealed One-Eyed Dragon to win. So that's actually a pretty smart move from Paul here. It's just a matter of seeing if Dan's top deck is anything. or if it's just an extend of the hand. There's that sniper shot. That is the match. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.